Here's my 1989 Honda NX650, also known as the Dominator in Europe. This is my part 2 video of installing a SuttonCycleWorks.com external oil cooler on the motorcycle. So just a quick recap from my part 1 video. In order to prepare the motorcycle to install the kit are the following: removing the seat, removing the gas tank, removing the plastic fairings, removing the smog valve, installing a smog block-off kit, and then finally draining the oil. In my case, I decided to put the bike up on top of a plastic box just to make it a little bit easier. And also in my part 1 video, I talked about the components and the parts that are included in the kit. So let's go ahead and talk about what's next in the instruction manual. So on page 3 of the instruction manual, so let me walk over here to the side of the bike, and then I'll show you what it talks about in the manual. So on page 3 of the manual, it talks about the oil line that starts at the base of the frame and then goes all the way down to the base of the motor. So let me show it to you real quickly. So the oil line starts here. That is a 19mm nut that's on there, and you will need a 19mm wrench to remove it. Comes all the way down and around and ends up at the bottom or the base of the motor. This is a 22mm nut at the bottom and then a 19mm at the top. You will need those 2 wrenches in order to remove this. As you can see in my particular case, being that I'm doing this video with one hand, is I already removed this. The next item that is on page 3 of the instruction manual is to mark this oil line. So in using a black permanent magic marker or a Sharpie or a pencil, anything that you'd like, we need to mark it. So as you can see, I've already marked, so I'm going to mark it again to show you guys. So we're going to mark it here, oops, and here. That is where we're going to be removing that section of oil or that section of tube. So let's go ahead and take this line completely out. Now, there's one thing that I'd like to point out that says in the instruction manual is to be careful of the black rubber isolator, which is, in my case, which is right here, that attaches to the oil line and also is on the frame itself. Let's not go ahead and lose that. So I'm going to remove the line. Let's take it out. And that's the first thing that we're going to do. So let's walk over to my bench, set that down, set the instruction manual down, set the line down. On the next page, it talks about, which we had already done, is using a 19mm and a 22mm wrench to remove the oil line, which we had done. Let's go over to the next page. Now it talks about cutting the line on those 2 spots. So we have we marked it here and here, and we're going to be using a pipe cutter tool. Got this one from Lowe's many years ago. It's just a cobalt. It will work just fine. We'll go ahead and cut that. The one thing that I'd like to point out after we do cut this is we need to clean it. And it's really important that where we made our cuts here and here, we're going to use some emery cloth or some very, very fine sandpaper. We're going to lightly sand this down and make sure that it is clean. And then the next step after that is we're going to be utilizing some carburetor cleaner, brake cleaner to thoroughly clean out the inside of this tube to make sure we don't have any lingering metal particles. And then we'll use my compressor and then we'll blow out the line. So let's go ahead and do that, and I will be back in a few minutes and we'll move on to the next step. I cut the pipe in the spots that we had marked. I used a little bit of emery cloth and I cleaned the edges so there are no burrs along the edge and it'll slide correctly into the rubber tube. I used also some brake cleaner, blew it through there, cleaned everything off, and finally I used my air compressor and blew some air through the oil line just to make sure there's no additional particles that are in the actual line itself before we reinstall. The next step in the process is to install the bracket. And let me just come down here real quickly so I can show you guys. We are now going to install the bracket onto the side of the bike. And on page 6, it gives us detailed instructions on how to do so. The camera, got to mention, is I mounted it onto a tripod. So hopefully you guys can watch me while I do this. It's pretty simple. There were 3 bolts, these 3 bolts in the bike along the casing. I had loosened them up, and now I'm going to remove them because we no longer need them. The hardware that we're actually going to need now is we need the following items. We have the bracket, so we've got that. There are 3 bolts. 2, you will notice, are the same length, and then there's a third which is a little bit longer. This third one, which is longer, is going to go in the middle, and then the 2 shorter ones are going to go up on top, like such. The spacers, you will also notice there are 3 spacers. 2 of them are the same length, so they're the shorter ones, and then we've got the longer spacer, which is going to go in the middle with the longer bolt. And then we finally have some washers that are going to go onto those bolts. So I'm going to take my bracket, I'm going to take a bolt, a shorter bolt, and a washer. I'm going to put that washer on top of there, like so. We're going to slide this through. We're going to take one of our shorter washers, put that on there. And what I like to do, now this is just me, I like to put a little bit of Loctite. Now this is just medium strength. It's not the red stuff, which is really, really strong. Just in case this thing decides to back out on us, I'm just going to slightly put that on there, like so. Go on to my longer bolt, put a washer on the end, take my longer spacer, put it through like this, like so. And before I put that in there, I'm going to put, well, let me do it this way instead. Let me put a little bit of Loctite on the end of it like this, and I'll just slide it through. Probably be a little bit easier to get it through there. Don't want too much of it to drip off. And I'm going to put it on. And last but not least, we have the 3rd bolt, a washer. I'm going to put a little bit of Loctite on there. My last spacer. Slide that in. Now, using a, I believe this is a 6mm hex. This is a 5mm hex. So let's go ahead and I'll just tighten this up just a little bit. Get that on there. And then I'll come back around later and make it a little bit tighter. Okay, so now that's on, just a little bit. I didn't want to make it too tight right now. Like I said, I'll come back around a little bit later and I'll tighten them up to the correct specs. It does say in the manual to torque these 3 bolts down to 10 Nm. Now that is a metric strength or tightening. So we'll come back around in a little bit. I'll pull out my tool and I'll tighten them down to the correct torque. Moving on here to page 7, we are now going to install the oil cooler onto the bike. Now it does say that the oil cooler has 2 pre-installed bolts onto the side, where they're those hex. So what we'll do is we need to remove them. And I believe this one, they should be, let's see what I've got here. Okay, that's the right size. So let's go ahead. This one says it's 4 millimeters. So let me go ahead and take these off because it says that we don't need them. They're already just pre-installed. So let me unscrew them. Now, next step is we need these two small flathead bolts that are 6mm by 25mm, and then we also need two washers, which are these larger washers, these two guys. And we're going to take our oil cooler and we're going to take our bracket. Now it does say be careful threading the bolts into the oil cooler. It is very easy to cross thread the bolts, so don't force it in. So let's go ahead, and this is actually going to mount just like that onto the bike, like so. Does it go on the inside? Yep, that's the way it should go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put my bolt through that washer. I'm going to put a little bit of Loctite on there. Just a little bit. And I'm going to now take my oil cooler and the bracket, or the guard if you want to call it. Slide this guy into here like so. I'm going to be really careful while I put this through here so we don't cross thread or strip the threads. I'm just going to tighten it up just a little bit and put this through like that. There we go. I want to be really careful. So when I line this up, the bolt will go straight through. Take my second bolt, my second washer, like that. Put a little bit of Loctite on the end. Slide that through. Now what I'd recommend doing is just manually, using your hand, get it lined up. And be very careful tightening this up. We don't want to cross thread the threads that are already in there. So just be real careful tightening it. I can feel it grab, so it's grabbing now. I'm going to tighten that up like that. So we're not going to over tighten this, is what it says. So I'm just going to tighten this up just a little bit. Like I said, I've got some thread locker on the end, so that's good. Now what it says is, after tightening up the cooler, make sure there is no play between the oil cooler and the oil cooler mount. Everything looks good. If there's some play in and out, not the play from the rubber mounts, shorten the bolt with a file or grinder by 1mm and try again. This is done to keep too long of a bolt from damaging the oil cooler. Continue this process until there's no more play. So in our particular case, we don't have any more play. Like I mentioned a moment ago, I'm going to go back around and I'm going to tighten these up to the correct specs. And then the next video that I create is I'm going to start installing the oil hoses directly onto the oil lines. So let me go ahead and put that down, show you guys real quickly what it looks like. You should be able to see it pretty well. I think it looks fantastic. If you look at that, I mean, tell you the truth, guys, this is a great piece of machinery. If you look at it from the side, it's beautiful. I mean, it really is. So check back with me for the next video, part 3. When I install the oil line and the oil hoses. And I really do appreciate you guys watching the video. Hope you're enjoying this. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you.